Hey there. In the last video, we were talking about what plants needs to grow. We talked about we talked about sunlight. We talked about water. We talked about air. We're talking about all the things the plants need to grow. If you need more information on that, you can just go ahead and watch the last video. However, in this video, we would be talking about flowers. Why do plants have flowers? We already talked about the parts of the plant, where we talked about the roots, where we talked about the stem or the trunk, where we talked about the leaves, and also we talked about the flowers. So we know plants have flowers. So why do they have flowers? What are those flowers for? And you see, those flowers are so that plants can make seeds. If you remember, in the we said that a plant is a living thing, and something very important about living things is that living things reproduce. Can you remember Mrs. Green? Or movement, reproduction, sensibility, growth, respiration, excuse me, uh, excretion, and nutrition. So we said that living things, they possess these things, and that's how we know they are living things. Now, we are talking about flowers. We say flowers are important because flowers are what help the plants to make seeds. So without flowers, we would not have seeds. So the reason why we have those seeds that will develop into other plants, into into plants, is because of those flowers. So flowers are important because they help to make new seeds. And we also talk about pollination. Now, what do we mean by pollination? Now, if you see this image here, it's the image of nice flowers, and this is a farmer, and you have insects around. We said pollination happens when bees or wind move pollens from one flower to another. Now, plants have this part of them that is called pollens. If you look at those tiny, tiny things, these dot, dot, dot on just on the flowers, those are the pollens. So you see these bees, they come around, they touch these pollens, and when they do, they take from one flower to another. And when these bees come on these flowers, it takes from this part, say it takes from this flower, then it could take it to maybe this flower, or it could take it to this flower, it could take it to this flower, it could take it to this flower. And that now starts to cause a seed to grow inside the flower. Now, when the seed begins to grow inside the flower, and when the seed is already ripe, they begin to spread out, and that spreading out is what we call dispersal. The spread out of seeds to make new plants is what we call dispersal. So I'll go by it again. So we said flowers are important because they help us to make new seeds. And how does that happen? It happens through pollination. What exactly is pollination? Pollination is when you have tiny bees like this, they perch on these flowers, they use their bodies to pick pollens, and they go to other flowers. And those pollens they pick from this flower goes on this flower, or those pollens they pick from this flower goes on this flower, or the pollens they pick from this flower goes on this flower, or any other flower. And because that happens, seeds now begin to grow inside each flower. Then when the seed grows, when the seed is already ripe to come out, then there is a spread out because it doesn't come out in one or twos. It comes out in your numbers. You're going to see something later on in this class. It comes out in your numbers, and that's what we call dispersal. Now this dispersal has four ways it happen. It can happen by wind. Maybe you have wind blowing. It could happen by animals. Maybe you have like a bird. It comes to perch on a plant. And some it could happen by water. Maybe there's a flood, takes moves the um, plant away, and somehow the seed goes away. And also pea pods, maybe pea pods, when you have pea grown and when they're overripe, they begin to outgrow, the seeds just begin to pop out, and that could be a way. Now what are we talking about? For instance, this is a type of dispersal. Now in this dispersal, this is an insect type dispersal. So the insect comes here, it perches on this, so it takes the seed from this flower, and it could take it elsewhere, or it could just toss it somewhere else. And before you know it, a new plant begins to grow, something like this. And also, we have wind dispersal. Now, what's a wind dispersal? A wind dispersal is when now not an insect this time around. You now have the wind. Maybe there was a really strong wind at that time, and it begins to blow and blow and blow. And what happens? It entirely blows away the seed sometimes. It just blows the seed away into some other place where the seed now begins to grow on its own. So sometimes it's the insect. The insect comes, touches it, just goes to another place entirely and drops the seed, and the seed begins to grow on its own, and it becomes another plant. So that way, one plant has birthed another plant. What other type of dispersal? We also have animal dispersal. So, I talked about birds. So in this case, you could have maybe a bird come to perch on a plant, or they come to take something around. Maybe, for instance, this bird comes to take a worm, and its body could just contact some of the seeds. So what happens? It flies away to another place, carrying seeds with it. Maybe it flaps its wings, seeds are just falling all over the place. And before you know it, you have another plant in another place. So that's how the animal dispersal works. So it comes around. If you had a farm, and sometimes you're always weary of birds coming around because you don't want them to take the grain. But sometimes as they come to perch on those grains, they also take some of the seeds along with them. So when they flap their wings away, those seeds drop in some other kind of place. And some of them drop on soils that are very good. Remember, we spoke about soil in the very first video where we talk about the nutrients. And we said those nutrients are gotten from the soils where the root picks them up. So when the seed falls on different grounds and soils, the seed is able to locate nutrients from where it is, and it begins to grow. So it begins to grow, 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 and boom, it becomes a plant like this. Now it now becomes let's say it's a pea pod, for example. It becomes a plant like this. Now, this kind of plant, how does it grow? When this kind of plant grows, and when it's ripe, and when it's getting too ripe, such that maybe the farmer hasn't come around to take it, and it's just there, it's growing, 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 and it gets so much that it begins to drop itself. So because it begins to drop because it's becoming too much for even the P2, even the pea pod to hold, because it's becoming too much. So what happens? It drops some tiny, tiny ones, maybe on the ground, or maybe wind comes, just like the last one, wind comes, blow it away. So somehow, it's just going to find its way to another soil where it will now start growing. It will now start growing like this again. So how does that happen? Now, if you look at this, just look at this guy dropping the seeds. Yeah, that should ring a bell. It talks about the insect dispersal. So here, say this guy was a bee, he taking the seeds here, So what happened? He was flying. They don't really know that they do this, but they're just flying on their own. And what happens? It drops some seed into the soil. So remember, I said the soil will now start to look for nutrients, right? Will start to look for nutrients on its own to survive. And it begins to grow, grow, grow. Now, look at it again. Now it grows into flowers. Look at this bird here. So what does this bird do? It perches on it. It takes some seed again. So it goes again to another place. Those seeds will drop like this again, and it begins to grow, and the same cycle begins to repeat itself again. So that's why we said from seed to plant, we have the 7 steps that usually happen. The seed, first of all, that's where the bee gets the seed from wherever gets it from, and it tosses it on the ground. What next? Germination. So now the seed is inside the ground. It starts to look for nutrient because it has to survive, and it finds nutrient. What happens? A small baby plant with leaves, so it begins to grow. So adult plant grows flowers, then eventually from here it goes all the way here. So what happens again? Flowers grow up and they're pollinated. Remember pollination. So one, maybe the bees come around, they take some of the pollens from one of the flowers, they take it to the other flowers, maybe from this flower to this flower, or from this flower to this flower. And what happens? You have seeds that are formed. Now, when those seeds are ready, the bird comes around. It picks some, it chews some, it takes some along. It doesn't even know he's carrying the seeds with him. So, what happens again? The seeds spread and the cycle starts again. So, again, the seeds fall somewhere, begin to look for how to survive, get nutrients, become a plant, and continue just like that. So, for example, this is the life cycle of a plant. So this is life cycle of an apple tree. So if you see from the seed, germination, sprouts, seedlings, it becomes a tree, has flowers, becomes pollinated, fruits come around, and birds, the same cycle all over again. I'll show you another one. Now, this is for beans too. This one is very common. Maybe you must have even done this in school or in the garden before back at home. So it starts from the seed, becomes a sprout. Here it's looking for nutrients. It has to survive. Yay, it survived. It's beginning to grow, grow. It becomes flowers. It has flowers here. Those flowers gets pollinated. It produces the actual beans. And some birds come, they take some of the seeds away, they toss it somewhere again, and the cycle starts all over again. So, why are flowers important? Flowers are important because that is how we get our seeds. Flowers are important because that's how we make our seeds. We spoke about pollination. Pollination, where the bees will move pollens from one flower to the other flower, and the seeds grow inside the flower, and the seeds spread out maybe by bees, wind, animals. They could just pop out all on their own. And we see the cycle, and it goes again and again and again. So now let's look at some fun facts about plants. So do you know that a bamboo can grow 1 meter in a day? Wow, that's interesting. So it means that a bamboo could be almost as tall as a baby just from one day. And we have other interesting fun facts here. And now let's go to review. Okay, now that we've learned what we have been doing so far. So I believe you've been following the video up until now. So what are the 4 parts of plants? What do plants need to grow? How does water move in a plant? What is pollination? So you should try, since you've been following us with this video, you should be able to answer all these questions by now. So then here's a little exercise for you. Draw a plant. It's right there in the video. I'm sure yours is colorful and bright. So with that, we have come to the end of this video. Thank you.